Alright, let's continue our discussion on Stoicism, where now we're going through the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And today I would like to talk about the second passage from the third book. We should also attend to things like these, observing that even the incidental effects of the processes of nature have their own charm and attraction. Take the baking of bread. The loaf splits open here and there, and those very cracks, in one way a failure of the baker's profession, somehow catch the eye and give particular stimulus to our appetite. Figs likewise burst open at full maturity, and in olives ripened on the tree, the very proximity of decay lends a special beauty to the fruit. Similarly, the ears of corn nodding down to the ground, the lion's puckered brow, the foam gushing from the boar's mouth, and much else besides, looked at in isolation, these things are far from lovely, but their consequences and the processes of nature enhances them and gives them attraction. So any man with a feeling and deeper insight for the workings of the whole will find some pleasure in almost every aspect of their disposition, including the incidental consequences. Such a man will take no less delight in the living snarl of wild animals than in all the imitative representations of painters and sculptors. He will see a kind of bloom and fresh beauty in an old woman or an old man, and he will be able to look with sober eyes on the seductive charm of his own slave boys. Not all can share this conviction, only one who has developed a genuine affinity for nature and her works. For him, there will be many such perceptions. I think this is a very nice text that Marcus Aurelius writes there. And the way I look at this is of course, there may be a little bit of sort of a memento mori, remember death thing in there, but there is a lot of that in a lot of parts of his meditations. So I don't want to keep talking about that. Today I would like to talk about another issue that I find very interesting, and that is that sometimes it's the less attractive sides of things that actually make them beautiful. And he gives examples of bread that sort of cracks and breaks open, but that actually makes that bread look appetizing because you get a nice crunchy crust on that bread, for example. Or the fig that is so ripe that it bursts open, but that means that it's really ripe and it's ready to eat, right? So, to me, what this kind of boils down to is the idea of your point of view really matters. And as we have discussed a number of times in these videos, although you cannot necessarily change the circumstances of the things that happen to you, you can change the way you look at those circumstances, the way you think about those circumstances. And when you think about it, a lot in our world comes down to certain circumstances, right? And your specific view of those circumstances. And how often have you not been convinced that you were absolutely right in a discussion or an argument and that the other side was wrong, but in reality maybe both sides were wrong or both sides were a little right, right? But that depends on a point of view. I will gladly affirm my nerdism, but remember Obi-Wan Kenobi's line in Return of the Jedi, what I told you was true, from a certain point of view. Now, let's not get into the aspect of what is truth and what is not truth, but I think very simply this affects all of our reality. Your reality is created from your point of view. And your point of view could be right or wrong, but again, that's not something I want to debate now. What I want to talk about is your reality is made up from the way you think about that reality. That's very interesting. So to give you a very concrete example that is now not super relevant anymore, but at some point there was this great controversy over the picture of the dress. Some people perceive it as, I think, blue and black or blue and gold, whatever, and other people perceive that same picture of that dress to be white and gold or whatever. So there is two different ways to look at that picture. And that illustrates a very interesting scientific point, which I happen to be teaching a course right now at the college called Sensation and Perception. So sensation is the very early part of the whole process of perceiving something. So for example, right now you're watching this video, so this camera is reflecting light, reflecting off me, and there's more and more reflections going on, but anyway. And the camera reflects the light bouncing off of me. And if you would be in front of me, if we would be in the same room, then the light that bounces off of me would hit your retina, and it would stimulate receptors on your retina, right, the rods and the cones, and that is sensation. But then that signal is sent to parts of your brain, some lower parts and some sort of higher order parts, and those parts of your brain will then create an actual image. All your photoreceptors in your retina, all they signal is basically just light and dark. And later your brain turns that into a perception. So that's the difference between sensation and perception. Sensation is that early part, and perception is a more extensive and more sort of brain-based part. Now, when you think about that dress, the sensation is the same for everyone because you're all looking at the same picture. Imagine me, of course, you could say, well, different computer screens. Yeah, no, but it's not that. Imagine I print that picture and I give it to people. They look at it from the same angle in the same room. Then the sensation is the same. It's the same amount of light bouncing off that picture onto their retinas. And yet some people perceive the dress as white and others perceive the same dress and the same picture as blue. Well, if our perception of dresses is that easily led astray, then imagine what happens to our perception of real things in the world, right? And I think that is a point that Marcus Aurelius is trying to make, not with that sort of neuroscience background I just gave you, but in general. There are different ways to look at things. You can look at annoyances from the perspective of, well, this is an annoying thing, or you can look at it from a different perspective. Here's a concrete example. I just came home from sort of a Christmas celebration at work, and a colleague commented on the fact that we had to pay for alcoholic beverages. And I said, well, but you can also turn that around and think that in these economic times, it's kind of amazing that we get free food. It's the same situation. The sensation is the same, but someone's perception, including the way you think about an event, can be different. And if you reframe a problem like that, or an issue like that, or maybe an annoyance like that, then things become different, don't they? Then instead of complaining, I mean, I don't want to, like, she wasn't really complaining, she just remarked on that. Instead of complaining about having to pay for your alcoholic beverages, which in our case, strictly speaking, would have been paid for by taxpayer money, right? Instead of complaining about that, you can also be grateful for the fact that you are fed for free, right? Same scenario, different way to look at things. And sometimes, I agree there with the emperor, I think sometimes we tend to forget that it is those small things. That's always within our control. That's a very Stoic thought. You can always control your thoughts and try to change your perspective. You can't change the thing, but you can change your perspective. This we talked about many times, but it holds here. And I agree with the emperor that often it is the imperfections that make something beautiful. And that too is a matter of changing your perspective. Instead of looking at a ding or a dent on some object that you like as something detracting from the beauty of that object, you could also think of it as, well, this is an object that I love and I've really used. And it shows the traces of my use. Wabi-sabi in Japanese culture. And that, I think, is a very interesting way to look at things. So sometimes it's really the imperfections that make something really interesting, right? And that always reminds me of the beautiful song Anthem by Leonard Cohen, who sang, "Ring the bells that still can ring." There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. It's the imperfections. It's the imperfections not just in things in life, but also in humans that make them beautiful. Imagine that everybody would be perfect. How boring would life be? Because everybody would be perfect. I don't think that would be an ideal situation at all. Everybody has imperfections. And to me, one of the great assets of Stoicism, one of the great things it brings to the table, is an ability for you to work on some of your imperfections. Like getting angry easily, or getting frustrated easily, or in this case, not looking at the negative side of things, but not the positive sides. And I genuinely believe that if you start to look at the positive aspects of life more, you'll enjoy life more. It's almost unavoidable, right? Instead of focusing on the negative, you focus on the positive. And often it's very simple. This is like the age-old thing, like, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? It boils down to the same thing, but it's your perspective that makes it different. You can use your hegemonikon, right? That highest faculty, ruling faculty of your mind, according to the Stoics, to do that. You're always in charge. You can change that. I found this a very interesting passage in that book. So, I hope this was interesting and relevant. I'll be back next week. I'll gladly see you then. Bye-bye.